Kia ora. Welcome to Campfire Stories. I'm Rose from Christchurch City Libraries. Thanks for joining me today. I'm reading The Moving Finger by Agatha Christie. So far we've had one death, Mrs. Symington, through a suspected suicide. Cyanide, apparently. Anyway, we're up to the inquest. The inquest was held 3 days later. It was all done as decorously as possible, but there was a large attendance, and as Joanna observed, the beady bonnets were wagging. The time of Mrs. Symington's death was put at between 3 and 4 o'clock. She was alone in the house. Symington was at his office. The maids were having their day out. Elsie Holland and the children were out walking, and Megan had gone for a bicycle ride. The letter must have come by the afternoon post. Mrs. Symington must have taken it out of its box, read it, and then in a state of agitation she had gone to the potting shed, fetched some of the cyanide kept there for taking wasps' nests, dissolved it in water and drunk it after writing these last agitated words, "I can't go on." Owen Griffith gave medical evidence and stressed the view he had outlined to us of Mrs. Symington's nervous condition and poor stamina. The coroner was suave and discreet. He spoke with bitter condemnation of people who write these despicable things, anonymous letters. Whoever had written that wicked and lying letter was morally guilty of murder, he said. He hoped the police would soon discover the culprit and take action against him or her. Such a dastardly and malicious piece of spite deserved to be punished with the utmost rigour of the law. Directed by him, the jury brought in the inevitable verdict: suicide whilst temporarily insane. The coroner had done his best, Owen Griffith also, but afterwards, jammed in the crowd of eager village women, I heard the same hateful sibilant whisper I had begun to know so well. "No smoke without fire, that's what I say. Must have been something in it for certain sure. She wouldn't have done it otherwise." Just for a moment I hated Lymstock and its narrow boundaries and its gossiping, whispering women. It is difficult to remember things in their exact chronological order. The next landmark of importance, of course, was Superintendent Nash's visit, but it was before that, I think, that we received calls from various members of the community, each of which was interesting in its way and shed some light on the characters and personalities of the people involved. Amy Griffith came on the morning after the inquest. She was looking, as usual, radiant with health and vigour, and succeeded, also as usual, in putting my back up almost immediately. Joanna and Megan were out, so I did the honours. "Good morning," said Miss Griffith. "I hear you've got Megan Hunter here." "We have. Very good of you, I'm sure. It must be rather a nuisance to you. I came up to say she can come to us if you like. I dare say I can find ways of making her useful about the house." I looked at Amy Griffith with a good deal of distaste. "How good of you," I said. "But we like having her here. She potters about quite happily." "I dare say. Much too fond of pottering, that child. Still, I suppose she can't help it, being practically half-witted." "I think she's rather an intelligent girl," I said. Amy Griffith gave me a hard stare. "First time I've ever heard anyone say that of her," she remarked. "Why, when you talk to her, she looks through you as though she doesn't understand what you're saying." "She probably just isn't interested," I said. "If so, she's extremely rude," said Amy Griffith. "That may be, but not half-witted," Miss Griffith declared sharply. "At best it's wool gathering. What Megan needs is a good hard work, something to give her an interest in life. You've no idea what difference that makes to a girl. I know a lot about girls. You'd be surprised at the difference even becoming a girl guide makes to a girl. Megan's much too old to spend her time lounging about and doing nothing." "It's been rather difficult for her to do anything else so far," I said. "Mrs. Symington always seems under the impression that Megan was about 12 years old." Miss Griffith snorted. "I know. I had no patience with that attitude of hers. Of course, she's dead now, poor woman, so one doesn't want to say too much, but she was a perfect example of what I call the unintelligent domestic type. Bridge and Gossip and her children, and even there that Holland girl did all the looking after them. I'm afraid I never thought that much of Mrs. Symington, although of course I never suspected the truth." "The truth?" I said sharply. Miss Griffith flushed. "I was very terribly sorry for Dick Symington. It's all having to come out as it did at the inquest," she said. "It was awful for him." "But surely you heard him say that there was not a word of truth in that letter, that he was quite sure of that." "Of course he said so. Quite right. A man's got to stick up for his wife. Dick would." She paused and then exclaimed, "You see, I've known Dick Symington a long time." I was a little surprised. "Really?" I said. "I understood from your brother that he only bought this practice a few years ago." "Oh yes, but Dick Symington used to come and stay in our part of the world up north. I've known him for years." Women jump to conclusions that men do not. Nevertheless, the suddenly softened tone of Amy Griffith's voice put, as our old nurse would have expressed it, ideas into my head. I looked at Amy curiously. She went on, still in that softened tone. "I know Dick very well. He's a proud man and very reserved, but he's the sort of man who could be very jealous." "That would explain," I said deliberately, "why Mrs. Symington was afraid to show him or tell him about the letter. She was afraid that, being a jealous man, he might not believe her denials." Miss Griffith looked at me angrily and scornfully. "Good Lord," she said, "do you think any woman would go and swallow a lot of cyanide of potassium for an accusation that wasn't true? The coroner seemed to think it was possible. Your brother too." Amy interrupted me. "Men are all alike, all for preserving their decencies. But you don't catch me believing that stuff. If an innocent woman gets some foul anonymous letter, she laughs and chucks it away. That's what I—" She paused suddenly and then finished, "would do." But I had noticed the pause. I was almost sure that what she had been about to say was, "That's what I did." I decided to take the war into the enemy's country. "I see," I said pleasantly. "So you've had one too." Amy Griffith was the type of woman who scorns to lie. She paused a minute, flushed, then said, "Well, yes, but I didn't let it worry me." "Nasty?" I inquired sympathetically, as a fellow sufferer. "Naturally. These things always are. The ravings of a lunatic. I read a few words of it, realised what it was, and chucked it straight into the waste paper basket." "You didn't think of taking it to the police?" "Not then. Least said, soonest mended, that's what I felt." An urge came over me to say solemnly, "No smoke without fire," but I restrained myself. To avoid temptation, I reverted to Megan. "Have you any idea of Megan's financial position?" I asked. "It's not idle curiosity on my part. I wonder if it would actually be necessary for her to earn a living." "I don't think it's strictly necessary. Her grandmother, her father's mother, left her a small income, I believe, and in any case, Dick Symington would always give her a home and provide for her, even if her mother hasn't left her anything outright. No, it's the principle of the thing." "What principle?" "Work, Mr. Burton. There's nothing like work for men and women. The one unforgivable sin is idleness." "Sir Edward Grey," I said, afterwards our foreign minister, "was sent down from Oxford for incorrigible idleness. The Duke of Wellington, I have heard, was both dull and inattentive at his books. And has it ever occurred to you, Miss Griffith, that you would probably not be able to take a good express train to London if little Georgie Stevenson had been out with his youth movement instead of lolling about, bored, in his mother's kitchen until the curious behaviour of the kettle lid attracted the attention of his idle mind?" Amy merely snorted. "It is a theory of mine," I said, warming to my theme, "that we owe most of our great inventions and most of the achievements of genius to idleness, either enforced or voluntary. The human mind prefers to be spoon-fed with the thoughts of others, but deprived of such nourishment it will reluctantly begin to think for itself, and such thinking, remember, is original thinking and may have valuable results. Besides," I went on before Amy could get in another sniff, "there is the artistic side." I got up and took from my desk, where it always accompanied me, a photograph of my favourite Chinese picture. It represents an old man sitting beneath a tree playing cat's cradle with a piece of string on his fingers and toes. "It was in the Chinese exhibition," I said. "It fascinated me. Allow me to introduce you. It is called Old Man Enjoying the Pleasures of Idleness. Amy was unimpressed by my lovely picture. She said, "Oh well, we all know what the Chinese are like." "It doesn't appeal to you?" I asked. "Well, frankly, no. I'm not very interested in art, I'm afraid. Your attitude, Mr. Burton, is typical of that of most men. You dislike the idea of women working, of their competing." I was taken aback. I had come up against the feminist. Amy was well away, her cheeks flushed. "It is incredible to you that women should want a career. It was incredible to my parents. I was anxious to study for a doctor. They would not hear of paying the fees, but they paid them readily for Owen. Yet I should have made a better doctor than my brother." "Oh, sorry about that," I said. "It was tough on you. If one wants to do a thing," she went on quickly. "Oh, I've got over it now. I've plenty of willpower. My life is busy and active. I'm one of the happiest people in Lymstock, plenty to do, but I do go up in arms against the silly old-fashioned prejudice that women's place is always in the home." "I'm sorry if I offended you," I said, "and that wasn't really my point. I don't see Megan in a domestic role at all." "No, poor child. She'll be a misfit anywhere, I'm afraid." Amy had calmed down. She was speaking quite normally again. "Her father, you know." She paused, and I said bluntly, "Well, I don't know. Everyone says 'her father' and drops their voice, and that is that. What did the man do? Is he alive still?" "I don't really know. And I'm rather vague myself, I'm afraid, but he was definitely a bad lot. Prison, I believe, and a streak of very strong abnormality. That's why it wouldn't surprise me if Megan was a bit wanting." "Megan," I said, "is in full possession of her senses, and as I said before, I consider her an intelligent girl. My sister thinks so too. Joanna is very fond of her." Amy said, "I'm afraid your sister must find it very dull down here." And as she said it, I learnt something else. Amy Griffith disliked my sister. It was there in the smooth, conventional tones of her voice. "We've all wondered how you could both bear to bury yourselves in such an out-of-the-way spot." It was a question, and I answered it. "Doctor's orders. I was to come somewhere very quiet where nothing ever happened." I paused and added, "Not quite true of Lymstock now." That's enough for today. Thanks for joining me. See you next time. Ka kite.